Yeah, great. Thanks, Casey. Yeah, I mean, today we got a real special treat. I'm lucky enough to be in the same town of Colorado Springs. We have Bob Brenner today to speak with us as a group. And it's a treat. I mean, he's a legendary saddle maker. He's the owner and operator of Pikes Peak Saddlery here in Colorado Springs. He opened it up in 1978. Is that correct? So he has seen it all when it comes to what we're going to talk about today. Pricing out your goods, and I think this is a really important class, especially for a lot of our guys just starting out and going from the hobby level to the wanting to push it into the professional level and do this as a career. Um, Either way, there's a lot to learn today, from the conversation, I think, and I'm excited. I'm excited to share that. So Bob has taught a lot of seminars and classes at trade shows, U.S. and internationally, um, and I think we couldn't have done any better for this conversation today. So I think what we'll do is we're going to open it up with a little discussion on some of the topics we've been talking about this morning, and then we'd really like to open it up for a Q&A. So if you have questions out there, just like Casey said, Casey, I can't see anything as far as that comes in, so please interject. And we really would like to hear from you what questions you may have as you guys are starting your businesses out there. So thanks for letting me introduce you, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so we were talking this morning a little bit about there's a book that Bob wrote, and I think it's in the link to the link that we sent out this morning, or this for the Zoom call, but how to establish prices for saddle making. Now this book I've been reading, it talks about stuff that could be universal, whether it's saddle making, leather working, metal working, you name it. If you make a product, there's a way that you need to start looking at how to establish how to price that out. And that's the question that we always ask. What should I charge somebody? And a lot of us, they don't know or didn't have a background in it. What do? We look on Etsy, we look on some website. What is this guy charging? And it's from China production. I guess I need to match that price. Well, I learned really quickly that was the wrong answer. And Bob and I have been discussing that and some of the pitfalls that I fell into when I first started selling some leather goods. If I read this book, I'm ashamed of myself now for falling privy to that. But before we get started in that conversation, so this book I think is extremely valuable. If you guys are interested in this book, please talk to your advisors. This is a book that we should purchase for each and every one of you guys. So please, if you're interested after this conversation, email your advisor and let us know that you're interested in getting that book. We'll set that up. So, but Bob, just kind of starting from there, if you don't mind, I think that'd be a great topic to start on with these guys as far as these guys are starting out here.
Well, it's a problem that, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're a leather worker, whether you're in woodworking, pottery, whatever it is. Anything that's handmade by an individual or something like that. For years, the artists, if you want to call us that, have always had a problem with pricing their work. And a little bit more of a background on myself. I have a degree in business administration from Colorado State University with majors in accounting, finance, and data processing. Worked in the banking industry for 10 years before I decided to do this, which was a good deal. So I've read a few income statements and balance sheets and stuff like that. And basically, what I have in the book and what I do is it's what I go through to make sure that repeating myself, because if you don't charge the right price, you're going to go bankrupt. It's as simple as that. And so basically, if you talk about pricing, you have four elements in pricing. You have your materials, you have your labor, you have your overhead costs, and you have profit. Materials are fairly easy. Pricing, your labor is fairly easy. Where most people run into problems is in overhead. All right. And Mike and I were talking earlier this morning about, hey, you work in your home, you don't have any overhead. You got the same overhead whether you work at home or you lease someplace. All right. Someone had to pay for that room or that workshop that you're in. So you have to include that price, that cost in your overhead. And most people don't do that. And that's where I see the biggest problem with people who are doing it and starting out is they say, well, it's not a cost. Well, it is a cost. A very good example is my shop is in my house, it's in my part of my old barn, but I had a retail store for 13 years in Colorado Springs. And when I moved out here, all right, my customers would say, well, you don't have to charge as much for your work because you have your house at home, your shop at home, and you don't have the overhead. I got the same overhead because somebody had to build that building. You still have the electricity, you'll still have all that type of stuff. And that's where everybody usually gets into a problem. Okay. I'm a stickler for certain things. And when I teach the classes and stuff, and one of the things I want to talk about is you can get yourself in trouble. And I understand you had just recently you talked to somebody, an accountant or something, talked about LLCs and courts and stuff like that. Fine and dandy. I can't say which way to go. It depends on your individual situation. Okay. I am a full C Corp. As far as everybody's concerned, there's no difference between me and General Motors or Microsoft. All right, I'm a full C Corp. I did that for other reasons, but probably if I were to redo it today, I'd be an LLC. But back when I did it some 30 years ago, LLCs didn't exist. We had Chapter S's, and the Chapter S really didn't meet my situation, so we went to a full C Corp. One of the things I want you to do, and you got to think about this, all right? If you're in business, the first thing I want you to do is set up a separate checking account for your business. All right? Why? Well, many, many years ago, I had a young lady who lived in Denver, came down, and I did some leather work on her picnic baskets that she was selling through Neiman Marcus. Her husband was a dentist. They were doing quite well, and she was running her business. And one day, the IRS knocked on their front door and said, hey, you're commingling funds, therefore all your deductions are disallowed. And they were looking at a IRS bill of about $200,000. All right. The long and short of it is, when the dust finally covered, they actually got money back. But in accountant fees and lawyer fees, it was about $30,000. And that's because they had commingled their funds between their personal account and their business. And it was like that. So get a separate business account. and keep your money separate. All right. Like I say, you can get yourself in trouble. Again, if you're wanting to go out from the hobby area into the professional area, be a professional. And one of the things is, we turned off my phone here because of the thing is, I know it's a little tough, and we're new and stuff with cell phones and stuff like that, but I like to see you have a separate telephone line for your business. It's sort of weird when you call someone up to talk to them, and I do it from time to time, and the 6-year-old daughter gets on the phone and says hi. You know, it's neat, but you have to give an impression of you are professional. All right, you don't call your doctor and get the 6-year-old on the phone. And so if you show yourself that you're laissez-faire, that type of stuff, it translates into your customer, and your customer says, okay, they really don't need the money. I mean, it's sort of hard to get that, but try to be as professional as you can. Good business cards, this type of thing. I've always, you don't see it as much because technology changes, but 20 years ago when I was writing this book, I says, you get a separate checking account and you get the big checks, not the little checks. Okay, companies write big checks; they don't write the little checks. Follow me? And if you're ABC Woodworking, put that on your check, ABC Woodworking. All right. Now, depending on where you're at, what the state laws are, but get yourself a business name and all that type of stuff. You're going to have to jump through a few hoops here and there, but it's not that big a deal. But the thing is, you want to be professional. All right.
Yeah, and then Bob, I was thinking about we kind of touched on it this morning a little bit, but I think for the group, it'd be really good to hear this, and regardless if you're, just piggybacking on what Bob just said about starting and acting professional from the get-go, but these guys are all starting out, and I think the question is, when we're pricing our stuff out,
Mm-hmm.
is how do I determine what I should charge if I am not valuing myself as professional, which I need to change that frame of mind, right? Mm-hmm. And acting like a professional right from the get-go, and talk about some of the costs that you just talked about, the overhead, and even if it's your house, there's still a cost.
Yes.
You still got to turn the lights on. You still got to. You're sitting in the shop and you're.
Oh yeah, you got
your time.
You got the whole set of costs. An example. Okay, you need to go out. I live out in Black Forest, Colorado. About 6 years ago, we had a massive fire out here. You probably heard about it. In fact, it was the most costly fire in the state of Colorado. Over almost 500 homes were destroyed and stuff. Well, everybody got a huge wake-up call. A lot of people had their offices, accountants, lawyers, IT people and stuff, had offices in their homes and stuff like that. When they went to their insurance company after the loss, the insurance company said that is not covered. So you need a separate. Now, a lot of the insurance companies have a rider, your homeowner's policy. You can put a rider on that, but you need that separate insurance policy for that. That's just one of those little things that you have to think about. But that's an additional cost that you have to cover. I'll tell you what, let's just do a real quickie here. I'm going to grab.
Yeah, yeah. Great.
Sometimes my mind is stuff, but we'll just go over real quick the things you have to think about in pricing, and we're going to talk overhead costs. Start. You have accounting and legal expenses. All right. Somebody does your taxes. Did you have a lawyer if you're doing an LLC, did the lawyer do the LLC? You have advertising expenses, all types of advertising expenses. Promotions. Did you donate something? And here's one of the little things that a lot of people don't understand is if you're doing something and you're asked to donate something, and I've donated saddles and stuff over the years to various people. Let's say, I'll just use a saddle because that's what I do. I donated a saddle to a riding club so they could auction it off and make some money. Okay. The way the IRS rules work, if you're a sole proprietor, okay, you cannot deduct for tax purposes your time. Just the way it works. Okay, just like a lawyer cannot deduct their time when they help out a nonprofit. All right, they can't deduct that from their stuff. But it is a cost to you, so that has to be added into your and I put it into advertising expenses and stuff like that. Do you do any internet advertising? And like I said, I'm going to talk about saddle stuff because that's the main thing I do. But a horse show, they say, hey, will you sponsor this? You sponsor that. Those are type of things. Auto expenses. You're driving around for whatever reasons. All right. For most people, I wouldn't, most of us can't afford to have a vehicle that is totally allocated to their business. So I just say, hey, just use the rates from the IRS, but you got to keep a logbook, et cetera, et cetera. Bad debts, somebody's going to write you a bum check no matter what you do. It is, I have been extremely lucky in 40 some years of doing this. I've probably lost only about $500 to bad checks. People say, how? And I said, well, Guido's a good friend of mine. You have bank charges. All right. If you're doing this, the bank, if you've got your separate banking account, you get charges for that, like that. The other thing is credit cards. If you're going to run credit cards. Right now, years ago, you had to go through a deal. I use Square. There's all types of them out there now, but you get charged so much. With Square, it's I'm charged if I run it on the system with the card there. I think it's 2.7%. If you don't have the card, it's 3.7%. Okay, like that. Here's another thing where people have problems, and that's depreciation. You have to have depreciation expenses. If you go out and buy a stitcher, or you're a woodworker and you go out and buy a planer or a bandsaw or a table saw, okay, those are expenses that have to be done. Now, in the way the IRS world works right now, most people can go ahead and write that off in 1 year. Okay, your deductions are so high. The problem is if you write that off in 1 year, let's say you buy a table saw, and that table saw is one of the Jets or something like that, very expensive one. Let's just say $3,000. If you write that entire amount off in that 1 year, your expenses for that year are going to spike. And so when you get ready to come up with your pricing, see what my overhead is, that's going to be up there. So large purchases like that, you need to spread them out so you don't get valleys like this in your pricing. Okay. So if you do that, so let's say this year you go out and you buy that 3,000 item and stuff. So next year when you're coming up with your overhead, it's like that. So all of a sudden you're in 2021, your prices increase. Well, now in get ready to do 2022, you no longer have that. So now your overhead drops, okay? And so your prices go up and down. You want to have your prices are always going to go up. Nature of the beast. So if they're always going to go up, you want to have them on a nice, even keel. Don't want any of this. Okay, so you need to do that. The other thing is you need to have depreciation expenses. This is allow you to allocate money. Okay, your equipment's going to have to be replaced at some point in time. So that's something you have to think about. You have to keep, one of the things is freight. Let's say you, again, we'll use the leather area. You buy a side of leather and have it shipped in, okay? You got shipping involved. Well, that would be freight coming into you. We've already talked about insurance, okay? And you have to allocate a portion of what I talked about, this fire deal, okay? The insurance companies paid for the structure, okay, of your shop that you had in your house, but they didn't care the things. But that is an expense, so you have to allocate a portion of your homeowner's policy. That's an expense, all right? We're just getting some high points. Rents and leases, and this is where we look at it. What would it cost you if you went out in the market and leased or rented a place for your shop? So you go out where you live. What's it going to cost you? Okay, is it $8 a square foot? Is it $10 a square foot? Whatever it may be. All right. Figure out what your square footage is. I use an example in the book that we got a shop with 576 square feet. We use a commercial real estate rate of $6 a square foot. All right. So we're looking at it would cost you, if you were doing it outside your house, about $3,500 a year. All right. So you have to account for that. That's what it would cost you if you weren't in your house. All right. So those are just some of the highlights. There's a whole, there are other ones. Taxes. You're going to have taxes depending on what the state you're in. All right. You may have personal property taxes. So, you're a woodworker. Okay, according to wherever you are, okay, you're taxed on your equipment there. That table saw we were talking about. You may have to pay that. It depends on what you're at. So, utilities as the last one, lights, heat, water, stuff like that. It's on your thing, but you have to account for your portion that you use in your shop. Okay, that's the highlights on overhead, and you can get as detailed as you want on it. Okay, now on your wages. Okay, what do you charge? Well, that is a toughie. All right, I'll shock you. In my book, okay, we're talking whether you're a leather worker, or well, heck, it doesn't matter what you're doing, okay? You need to be, under the given conditions we have today, you need to be charging $70 an hour for your labor. That's based on the median income for a family of 4 in the United States. It comes directly from the Census Bureau. So you run that through. So no matter what you're doing, if you look on it that. So if you go to sit down and say, well, you know, my costs are not as much. Well, it's very simple. Go out on Google, Google your town, wherever it may be. Okay? I'm going to use Colorado Springs for example. You go that, and I think the median family income in Colorado Springs is like $60-some thousand. That's just the income. But I live in Black Forest, which is just on the outside of it. And out here, the median income is $84,000. All right? So you can look at it. If you're down in Texas, okay, there's places down in Texas where that median income may be only 40,000. So you base it on where you're at. Not, I mean, but I use the 70 because that's your average. Okay, that's the average. That's a benchmark. Some people are going to be higher, some people are going to be lower. But when you're talking about your overhead and your wage rates, especially your wage, okay, it's just not what you do. Okay, you're a sole proprietor now. So you got to pick up your Social Security, Medicare, all right? Somewhat depending on what your situation is, okay, you have to assume you're a business. So you have to figure out, you have to allocate money for like health insurance, retirement, stuff like that. And that's where everybody does it. So that's where it increases. Now, for me, I'll just tell you this right now. My shop rate in my shop is $84 an hour. Okay, but that covers everything. So, and then somebody says, well, I can't charge that because I'm just starting out. Understand it completely. So, but I always say, hey, just assume you're going through an apprenticeship. All right, and say, well, I can't charge because I'm just starting out. I cannot charge the $70 an hour. Understand that completely. So, okay, start out at $35 an hour. You're just beginning, half that. All right. Say you're going to go through a 4-year apprenticeship. That's your learning curve. So every 6 months, give yourself a raise. Okay, so you do it incrementally. And in 4 years, you go from 35,000 to the 70. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a good way to explain it. I think that's the two things that we were kind of talking about a little bit this morning too, is whatever industry that you're getting into, setting this up, and we talked about this last week with our individual, the CPA and the businesses, the taxes, setting up the corporation. This is a business, and this is what what all of us are working towards, is creating this to be not from that apprenticeship to full-time. And so treating it mentally, like Bob is talking about right now, setting things on the side, being able to save for the future retirement, being able to save, for your quarterly taxes, so you're not getting a major bill at the end of the year that you can't afford because you didn't budget for it. Getting organized, getting the guys in place, the CPA, the financial advisor, everything we spoke about last week, and then putting in, and then valuing your time, valuing yourself. And that's exactly what Bob's talking about right now. You set your price, you have your shop fee. If you want this to be a business and last more than a year, well, then you uh, better be a stickler on, this is what it costs for me to open my door and put a piece of leather on the table and start working. And then I value my time. And right now, we are all apprentices. That's a great example to use, is treat it like a 4-year apprenticeship, for yourself. Allow yourself to learn and grow, charge that something that is reasonable, and stick to that. And I'll give one quick example. Bob and I were talking this morning a little bit. I love doing leather work, and I did it out of my house in Virginia, and I was asked to make a trophy breast collar for a team roping event. I made it, and I got a handful of orders right after that. And one of the ladies came over, and she said the same thing that Bob was just talking about. Oh, you work out of your garage? And I said, well, yeah. I mean, this is where my shop is, So I work out of my garage. She goes, well, can you do this for me for $45? And I looked at her, and it was one of those awkward conversations. And I said, man, the materials alone are more than that. I'm going to be sitting here for 8-10 hours working on this. There's no way I could afford to give this away to you. I'm trying to create my business. And it was that awkward conversation that I didn't have the tools in my kit bag to say, well, this is my overhead cost. This is my shop fee, and stick to my guns with it. And if I did that and learned my lesson right up front and turned her down, well, then I would have valued myself. And then I wouldn't have put myself in a position of finding a customer later on who was willing to take that. So, Bob talked about an example in his book on a saddle. And I hope you don't mind me bringing this up. But, he had a customer come in, and and it's very similar. He came in and said, well, you're $250 more than this production saddle company. Will you match that price? And so the guy comes in to haggle. And Bob said no. Even though he needed the money, he said no. I did the wrong answer and said yes and haggled and wound up losing money in the end. Bob said no. A few days later, that gentleman came back and said, wait a minute, are you including stirrups? Are you including a rear cinch? Are you including, different parts of the saddle, not just the bare bones? And what he found out and realized was, that production saddle company was nickeling and diming him for everything that was worth, all the hidden fees, where Bob, as a professional, this is the cost of what it cost me, materials, my shop fee, my time. And I put together a product that is a custom made product here that you're gonna enjoy. And so the guy wound up coming back and realizing the value that it was in the saddle and wound up purchasing. So I just think it's a great lesson learned for all of us, who we're starting out. I don't know how to price myself. I don't know how to do this. Treat it like that apprenticeship. I think that was a great example on that. Casey, do we have any questions? I can't see anything.
We had one question that was in reference to payment processing. So you had talked a little bit about checks and potential bad checks and cash and credit cards and including that in your pricing. And I don't know, Bob, if you deal with this at all, but Venmo, I don't know if that's something you've used before. It's the payment. It's an exchange of funds medium where you can use your bank account and transfer to another account. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
That's new technology. I'm sort of a dinosaur when it comes to that. Understand that. I've never done it. Like I say, this is, that's something I do.
I have an answer for that.
I just, it's something that's new to me. Again, I understand where but we get into this area when I talk about professionalism, and I think this Venmo stuff and is stuff more between person to person than it is from business to business to person. Now, if it works, fine. I don't know. I mean, if it works, I have no problems with it.
You know, and gentlemen, I'll say this, and gentlemen and ladies, you know, all the different products that are out there. I've had a few of my apprentices have these different merchant accounts. There is a lot of them out there, and what I've recommended to my guys as a business, call your CPA, tell them, hey, this is what I researched in this. Do you recommend me using this? Do you have a recommendation I should use? But I think the main key point is what Bob talked about today. It's got to be separate card, separate account. You know, you start mixing personal and business, you're going to run into problems. And the CPA talked about that last week. So my recommendation on the Venmo, PayPal, Square, there's 100 of them out there. Call the CPA that you're working with and ask him what does he recommend, and go from there.
Now, PayPal is a standard. I use it. I sell stuff over the internet off my website, and we use PayPal. Works like a charm. But again, you got a cost on PayPal. Okay, I don't know what the percentage is, but you have to do that. And it's just, whether it be a credit card processor or PayPal, they're basically the same.
You bet.
And Venmo, I don't know what the processing is on that.
I'm not sure. I don't use Venmo.
Yeah, but I know some people to do it. But if it works, it works.
Yep, you bet. Casey, I see a question that came in. You mind if I just read it? Go ahead here.
Go for it.
It came from Christian. How do I confidently convey that a client to my client, my time is worth $70 an hour when competitors are charging less? Great question. I think we talk about that quite a bit, but you know, some of that part of the education.
It's educating your customer. Okay. Customers can be a little weird at times. I can give you an example. I have a customer who is my customer now, but many years ago, he won a saddle in one of my saddles that I donated to a riding club, a girls drill team, so they could raise some money, and he won it in the lottery. Okay, and even to this day, that saddle sits in his living room. And about a year later, he won another saddle. This guy was a lucky kid. He won another saddle, but it was one of the big production companies. Nothing wrong with production companies. Okay, that sits right next to that other saddle. And for years, that guy felt that those two saddles were equal. Okay, and I said, you know, the problem was the saddle that he got from the production company was a Cadillac, and mine was a Rolls Royce. Okay, but he valued them the same, and that's where you, as a business person, has to convince those people that they're getting something for their money. They're getting value. And that is your education. You do it on a daily basis. It's a toughie, no question about it. And by the way, that fellow now has two of my custom saddles.
Yeah.
Okay. And but it took me about 8 or 9 years to do that. Okay. It's not something that happens overnight, but it's basically educating your customers.
Yeah, great. Case, we got any other questions coming through, or?
We do. We got a staff member, BJ, has a question he wants to throw at you.
Yeah,
So-
BJ.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. the thing I would like to ask is with pricing and so forth. I see a lot of these guys who are saying, how do I compete and how do I compete? And my question goes to how do I control my growth uh, in reference to pricing so that it stays manageable? And I hope you understand what I'm saying, but not everybody's going to want to pay what you value your time at. And I feel like if you can cater more to people that are interested in your handcrafted, whatever it is you're doing, or even your services, and I think that you offer them something, you should be able to keep your clientele pretty small. So I'm just wondering, and I know everybody's going to have a different answer, but I'd like to get your take specifically on how you carved your name out with being able to do that.
Oh, well, first thing is you have to look at what your market is.
Mm.
All right. You're not going to compete with Walmart. If you're making belts, you're not going to compete with Walmart. No question about it. Okay. And so you have to show the value and stuff like that. And if all of your customers that you come in are the so-called Walmart customers, then you don't do that. Okay. I'll be honest with you. I don't make belts. They say you charge too much. That's fine. I don't make them. I do make it for friends, but I say, okay, fine. I mean, they say you charge too much. I say, well, I'm not going to work for, I mean, I could do that. I could make more money working at McDonald's.
Oh,
All
wow.
right. And so what's the point? All right. But you have to, and you have to look at your product line. I can give you a very good example of what you're talking about. You have to, when I first started out, I made custom saddles, still make custom saddles. But over the time, I saw that people didn't want to pay the price for my custom saddles. So I came up with what I call a production saddle that I have in stock. That somebody can walk in here, do it. It's called my trail riding saddle. I've been making them for 30 years. Okay. And so somebody wants just a saddle. They don't want the real fancy stuff. It's still quality work. Okay. But it's not real fancy and stuff like that. They can do it. Okay. That saddle is about half the price of my custom saddles. So you develop a product line to fit your market. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir. It does. And you hit exactly on what that makes a lot of sense to me because I feel like that's the one question everybody has is like, how do I control, because you don't want somebody waiting 6 months for a product. I think that's a bit too much, but you definitely hit that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I give a class at trade shows that I started about 2 years ago. I do Western, but I do a lot of repairs and I do a lot of English repairs. And I love the English people when they come in versus the Western people. Because they come in, I fix whatever their problem is, head stall, bridle, saddle, and you say, well, it was $75. And their first thing, that's all? You go to the Western people and you say $75 and they look at you like you were the biggest corporate pirate in the world. Okay, it's an attitude, so you got to change their attitude. But so you pick your market, and like I say, I got into the English repair market, which is about my repair work is right now probably about 60% of it, and I love it because I do it. I charge what I need to charge, and they think that I'm the nicest guy around because it didn't cost them that much. Because they have a different attitude. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Got anything else here? Looks like Bob, let me ask another question here that I think a lot of these guys that make a product here would be interested in knowing. And we talked about it once before, and that's kind of that brand loyalty. So for tools and materials, and as these guys are starting up and building up their shops,
Mm-hmm.
most of us can only afford right now the Craftsman tools, and for example,
Mhm.
we're talking about leather tools. Or the Harbor Freight, for the woodworking stuff. But I think we talked about it, and there's a reason that you stuck with, for example, Herman Oak.
That's a good example, and I think
Yeah.
it's in the book, isn't it? Isn't it?
It might be.
It might be.
Yeah.
This is a good example, and this hits close to home here. Many years ago, about 20 years, 19 years to be exact, I had a lieutenant colonel come in from Fort Carson, and he ordered a saddle for himself and his wife. Okay, now my custom saddles, it's going to take you about a year to get them. All right, and stuff. So we did the stuff. I require a 50% deposit on a custom saddle. Got that? We're good to go. Okay, got it down and got to the point where I was ready to build them, and I called the telephone number, and got no response. So I went ahead and built the saddles and called, and the telephone number that he'd given me was disconnected. So here I've got 2 custom saddles to do. Well, that was 2002. The lieutenant colonel was with 10th Special Forces. He got deployed. Okay, his wife went back home and stuff like that. We lost. Well, Herman Oak was my supplier for leather. I needed some leather to do the other stuff, but I mean, I was looking at, I was looking for that $5,000 for those saddles that I didn't get, and so I called up Herman Oak, who I've been with ever since, and they said, "Fine, Bob, pay us when you can," and they covered me. And the deal is, about a month later, he came back from deployment. He got his saddles, and we were good. But because I was with Herman Oak the entire time, they stood by me. And if you jump around from vendor to vendor, okay, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, I thought that was. We talked about that a little bit, and I thought that was a story that, for all of our guys, having that loyalty as you're building your shop, and you decide what is going to work for you. Because, for example, I'm using an ALD leather that I really like right now. That's different from Herman Oak, but it's not. The point of that discussion was, as you're finding your products, as you're finding your tools, start building these relationships, these business relationships, and that is what you're doing. Just like the other calls we've had, no matter what product you're selling yourself, and you're building relationships, and then you're building the best product that you can produce.
Yep.
And then with that, I think you also mentioned, the Herman Oak leather versus a different type of leather, it works different. And so over time, you develop how that piece of material works, whether you're a woodworker, a machinist, or a leather crafter. You can start to build that muscle memory, those tools that work for you, and that loyalty with those business relationships. And it's just another good practice to have as you guys are building up. But I just thought it was a good point to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we're pretty short on time, Casey. I just wanted to see if there's any last questions before we wrap up.
We did have one that was typed that we didn't get to, and it's something that was brought up briefly by Bob. The question, and I'll just read it, is Bob spoke about equipment costs during the year, spikes in prices, drops in prices. And Bob mentioned that we can spread them out over time. And Faustino just wants to know if you can elaborate on that a little bit, see how we can do it.
you know, what you do, we'll go back to our deal. We talked about the $3,000 table saw. Okay. Sit down. I mean, it's up to you because you're not depreciating them out for tax purposes. It's just for accounting purposes. So figure out what works for you. Is it 5 years? Okay. Is it 10 years? It depends. Depends on the item. All right. Right over here is a big stitcher that I bought back in the 1980s. It cost me $8,000. Okay. I depreciated that out over a 15-year period. Okay. Now I've had it for almost over 30 years, but that's what you do to even that out. Okay. Just think that answers the question.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think, Bob, is there any other final words, or I think we covered a lot of the highlights here.
I mean, it's not easy. It's not the fun stuff to do, but it keeps your doors open. You know, everybody looks at it, and you know, if you don't keep track of your prices and your costs, okay, if you don't do that, you're not going to be profitable, and you're going to go under over time. I mean, it's just the way it is. And I mean, it takes a lot of time. I've got on my computer, and I cost out everything, whether it be a notebook, a billfold, a belt, a saddle, whatever, repair work and stuff like that. I've got sheets on every one, what it cost me, how much time it took me to do it, et cetera, et cetera. Probably on the computer now, I've probably got probably about 4,000 items. Okay, so I know what it costs me. And then another thing, people come in and say, hey, I'd like this, give me a price. Every time I've quoted a price over the top of my head, I have lost money. Say, wait a minute, let me check it out, I'll get back to you. All right. You know, come in and say, oh, give me they'll say, well, what's it going to cost, say on repair? And I will usually say, if I think it's going to cost me an hour's worth of labor and a little bit, and it's $125 is what I think, I will quote to them 175 or say, wait a minute. You know, again, the more longer you've done it, the more you remember up here, but never come off the top of your head because the chances are you're going to make a mistake.
I think that's a good point because a lot of us don't have that background. We haven't priced it out. So giving ourselves a little time to research out what maybe some of the inflation of materials of cost, or just to sit down and kind of calculate, well, since I am an apprentice and it's going to take me twice as long, maybe this would be a reasonable amount to charge. So yeah. I think that's smart, having a little bit of patience. And you know, that way, as you're building your business, you can stick to your word and not say, oh, it'll cost me $100 and then realize it cost me $150 and I don't want to lose that much, you know? And so you don't have to renegotiate. It's, I think that's good practice, Bob.
Yep.
So, well, guys, I think this was a wonderful hour that we just spent. And so I'd like to close. Bob, thank you so much for your time spending with us. I know shutting down your shop for this hour, I know you will give the shirt off your back, but all of us, I could say this for behalf of all of us, we really appreciate this.
What you guys done, you know, it's the least I can do.
Bob won't tell you, but he's a fellow veteran himself. So, you know, it's great to see, you know, veterans helping veterans and what we're doing here. But thank you, Bob. Thanks for everything.
Oh, anytime.
If anybody has any questions further, please reach out to your advisors. If you're interested in the book, reach out to your advisor. And then everybody have a great day. So thank you.